I find it really timely, and I'm super excited about it for me. And I had a lot of people comment and ask for videos of it. And so I feel like I'm not the only one who feels like this is a struggle. And so we're going to be talking about kind of how to make friends. I put in my post today that when you're a kid, it feels so easy to just run up to another kid on the playground and go, hey, want to play? And then you just run off and play together. And that's about all you have to do. And as you get into your teenage years and adult years, it feels like it's just so much more complicated to try and connect with people and find people that have the same interests as you, and you have to be so selective about your time and your energy, and you want to be friends with people that bring out the best in you, and you want to be friends with people that are going to lift you up, and people that have similar interests as you, and also people who have different viewpoints than you. I don't know, I feel like it gets so complicated, and then you also feel like if you put yourself out there and get rejected as an adult, it feels weightier. And anyway, so I feel like this is good discussion fodder for tonight. So really grateful for Kenneth Jepson for being here as always. He teaches all these AF Aware classes for us, and is just a rock star as far as I am the library are concerned. Kenneth is a local therapist here in American Fork. And we're so grateful to have him teaching these classes for us at the library. I think I'm just going to stop talking now and turn the time over to Kenneth to tell us what he's got prepared for us. Take it away, Kenneth. Thank you.
I was thinking the other day, I have a friend, and I was saying, oh man, I miss you. We should get together. And this was a year ago now. And we like, maybe when this whole pandemic thing calms down, we'll get together. And now it's been almost an entire year, and I've got multiple people kind of in that scenario where I was like, yeah, I'd love to hang out, but let's just wait and see, where this goes. And it kind of sucks. I miss my friends, and you have to do all this calculus to decide, can I hang out with people? Am I safe? And that can be hard when you have just maybe one or two friends that you're trying to figure this out with. But it's also difficult when you don't have the friends in the first place. It seems like most people who have their friends they've been friends since school. That seems like a pretty common thing. I've heard people complain like, I moved here end of high school, I never really bonded with anybody, I don't have a group. And that can be a real challenge, because when everyone has their people, when everyone has their group and we don't, we don't really feel like we have a place. We feel kind of anchorless, and it's really crappy feeling of just like not having somewhere to fit in. When I was a kid, we lived in Saudi Arabia. My dad was helping set up the EMS system there, teaching the paramedics. And when we moved back, I was just like hitting the height of awkward puberty, and I was turning 15, and I'm in this new place I've never lived before. I'm supposed to make friends, and my mom had a friend that lived there, and we met up with them and had a picnic, right? And we got back, and she also had a 15-year-old son. And because my parents were friends, we were kind of thrown together and like, here, this is your friend, now be friends now. And it was nice to have that like easy introduction, but we didn't really fit so much. We weren't super compatible. It was hard to kind of try to find my footing. Now, luckily, I had a teacher who said, "That's the new kid. Anybody who says hi to him, come and tell me, and I'll give you a Jolly Rancher. And every time you say hi, you get a Jolly Rancher." So my friend Cody, he describes himself as a fat kid who likes Jolly Ranchers. Well, that's how we became friends there. But it's nice when somebody gives you an assist. And as I look back on my friendship group from 9th grade, we didn't really have a lot of cohesion there either. Even though we didn't have like super strong friendships, we still clung together because people need that tribe. And so we ended up just kind of being this group of social pariahs that all hung out because we didn't have anybody better to hang out with. And I was glad to have what I had because, like I said, it's a need. This is something that's a primal need For our history as humans, we've usually been living in kinship groups with extended family and friends of anywhere from like 50 to 100 people. And so now we're in this unprecedented stage of civilization where we don't have a lot of people around us necessarily. It's super easy to get isolated. And oftentimes people kind of find their friends, their tribe, and then they just settle down, and it can feel like really hard to break in that and even have someone's mind be open to gaining new friends if they've got theirs already. So it's baked into our genes, part of our history as a species. And if you ever start to doubt that, you can just look at politics and how incredibly intense politics are with the negativity and the fighting, because that's all it is. It's the tribalism. It's tribe versus tribe. And when we have our tribe, we feel like, okay, we're safe. We have a group. This works. So there are some people that say even have that need is a weakness. Like I shouldn't have to rely on anybody else. But that kind of completely ignores the fact of our history as a species. It's okay to need people. Now, what we need them for and what we rely on them for, that is a more nuanced discussion. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is, in part, why we need people, and the reason we usually default to needing them, and then how that causes problems. And then we're going to talk about the other way that we can need them. We're going to go over how to connect with people, how to start up the conversation, how to keep the conversation going, how to find the right people. So we're going to range pretty broadly, and we'll probably cover about every area that there's questions on, but we will have a Q&A at the end. So if you have anything, definitely write it down. You can put it in the chat box if you want. And Wendy's good at noticing those and letting me know that there's questions there. So I really wish we could be doing this in person tonight. So we're talking about how to connect with others, how to build friendships, and then we're just all staring into our webcams, and it can feel a little isolated. So if you can all do me a favor, regardless of when the last time was you combed your hair or cleaned your room, can you flip on the camera for just a second? Let's give each other a toothy grin and feel like, oh, look, we're all friends here. We're all hanging out together. This is nice. Look. Hello, I have a messy house. Do you want to see my messy house? Oh, yep, I got the shelves. I'm not afraid to show you. Oh, hello. Good to see everybody. A lot easier to do it in person, but we'll do what we've got. We'll do what we can here. So I think it's really important too to be having this conversation right now, not only because of the pandemic, but because things seem to be getting a little bit harder in the world. There's more fighting, there's more division and negativity than we've ever seemed to have had before, in my lifetime at least. And I think we're being attacked. I think the forces of darkness are coming after people. They're trying to sever us from each other. They're trying to separate us. They're trying to cause disconnection everywhere. And it's hurting us. It's hurting us as individuals, and it's hurting us as a society. And I'm here to wake people up to that. I'm here to point out what's going wrong and hopefully raise your awareness so that you can see this is about so much more than just building friendships. This is about getting close to your family. This is about forging bonds that are strong, that can withstand the normal ups and downs of life. And when we have those bonds with the people around us and everyone's interconnected, we have this strong web, this community that makes for a strong country. And dang, do we need that right now? Because I can see the writing on the wall. America's kind of sliding down into a dark place that we don't want to go to, where there's incredible disconnection. And we need people who are going to stand up against that and be different. We need people who are going to forge bonds rather than break them. We're going to try to unite people instead of dividing them. And we need a few less keyboard warriors and a few more warriors of connection. And we can all use a reminder sometimes. I've been Facebooking lately. It's not been the best thing for me. So this is a good opportunity for me to recommit too. So we're going to need to be creating some safe communities so that when things start to get amplified, there's going to be a place where people can get together and feel safe together and have a tribe where there's unity. So I'm grateful that we can be talking about this tonight so we can prepare ourselves for in case things get worse. And so I especially appreciate Wendy setting this up because it's an important topic, an incredibly important topic, and I probably wouldn't have thought to do it. But dang, we need this right now. So will you please pop on the camera and give Wendy a wave? Let her know you appreciate her setting this up.
Shelly apologizes. She says she doesn't have a camera on the computer she's on.
Well, hello. Have you here anyway. So why is it so hard for us to make friends, to connect with people? It all comes back to fear of rejection. This is what drives so many of our problems. We have the need, but we're also terrified of getting rejected. And so sometimes we pull back a little bit. We don't reach out. We don't put ourselves out there. Like Wendy was saying before we started, you used to be able to just run up to a kid on the playground and say, do you want to play? And it's a little more complicated now. And I think part of what complicates it is we became aware of ourselves, aware that we can be rejected. And we started to worry about it. And so we kind of stopped running up to people and being like, hey, do you want to play? In an adult way. Like I said, this is something that is totally baked into our history as a species. It has to do with the fact that we've existed in kinship groups and we've had people around us and we live in social hierarchies for so many years, so many centuries, that we're social creatures. Most of the advancements in our brains have to do with social relationships. We can keep track of hundreds of people. Who's mad at who likes who, what are the different factions, who's vying for leadership of the tribe. We're built to specialize on this, and so it becomes an incredible focus in our lives. And that can kind of be to our detriment too. Because think about this. If the tribe of people you're around likes you, you're going to be safe. People aren't going to be violent towards you. If you break your leg, people are probably going to take care of you until you heal. But if you start making people mad at you, if people start rejecting you in the tribe, then maybe when you break your leg, they just leave you. And now you're alone in the jungle and something's going to come and eat you. This has been like bred into us as a people. Rejection in our minds equals death. And our brains are super old. They really haven't advanced at all for a long, long, long time, eons. And so we have these old school animal brains that are all about like affiliation and connection and protection. And so as silly as it seems, talking to someone and facing that social rejection still registers to us as, oh no, I'm going to die. And that's why it's so hard to connect with people sometimes. What makes this even more challenging is we have gotten used to thinking that our value as a person comes from what the tribe thinks. And this is why people are so image conscious. This is why we care so much about how we're perceived and maybe what car we drive, what kind of a job we have, what kind of clothes we wear, who we're seen with. Are we part of the cool kids club? Because if we basically have lots of friends that like us, we feel like, oh, I matter. And if there's nobody around that we're friends with, we rate ourselves lower. And this all happens just on like a deeper subconscious level. It's just a perception of like, we don't even really think about it consciously. So it's sad, but like friend count often equals like self-esteem count. We've wired those two things together, that our value somehow has to do with what other people think of us. And that's why people are motivated to do a lot of crazy things. We need it. We need the connection, but we fear it because it's a double-edged sword. So this rejection fear shows up in the way we as people show up. When we come into a social interaction, this impacts our presence. So our presence, you know, when you watch somebody on stage and they steal the show, if you've ever seen that somebody in a play who just all eyes are on them, they're not even the main character. They're just so bright and they're just shining and standing out. They've got stage presence, we say. Each one of us has a presence, whether it's the kind that attracts attention or the kind that doesn't. I have a client who has practiced for most of their life at blending in. being a chameleon, because they learned at a very young age, if they stand out, they get hurt. And so on such a deep level, they've just kind of become blank and they blend in. And when you start to think about, like, I've known them now for quite a while, and so I understand their personality. But when I first met them, they just seemed like generic human. Like there was nothing memorable about them because they were holding a part of themselves back. Their presence wasn't showing up. They were just trying to not be noticed. And so they've struggled most of their life with having friends because they're not really showing anybody who they are. And so people don't have the opportunity to connect with them. So our presence is the energy, the emotional, mental energy that we bring to interactions with people. And that's going to show up in a couple different ways. It's going to show up in our words, what we choose to say. It's also going to determine what we choose not to say. Sometimes we're afraid to say something weird. We don't want to get judged. So we'll hold stuff back. We'll exchange pleasant banalities. We'll make small talk, you know? It's also going to come out in the tone of our voice. When you talk to somebody that's really confident, you just feel it. And a lot of that comes through the tone of their voice, the way they talk. And when someone is kind of like worried, that also comes through too. And it impacts their body language as well. So whatever we hold on the inside is going to be reflected on the outside. And a lot more of that comes through than you might think. When we have self-esteem, we naturally start to hunch over. And this also comes from our history as a species, because this part of you is the soft, squishy part that can get hurt. And so when we feel low confidence, when we feel under threat, we start to curl, kind of hunch our shoulders to protect our vital organ. And so we're sending all these subtle cues all the time to all the people around us without knowing we are. And a lot of times people are picking up on those without even knowing that they're picking up on them. So it's almost like we enter the room before we actually get there. The energy we bring, the body language we show, the words and the tone, it says a lot about us. So if we've got low energy on the inside, it's going to manifest on the outside. Most of the time, that's going to come out in the body language. And so therefore, like, the energy we have can be an attractive force that pulls people in, or it can be a repulsive force that pushes people away. And we are constantly putting this off all the time, whether we know it or not. You know, sometimes when we have low self-confidence, we're in that low energy vibe, we're kind of hunched. And just like being in the low energy state, you don't make eye contact with people as much, kind of hide, you look at the ground. Sometimes you do closed gestures with your body language. And then when someone's looking at you from afar, they're going like, oh, they don't seem like they're wanting to engage with me. They don't want to talk. I better leave them alone. And we may be sitting there going like, oh my gosh, I wish somebody would come up and talk to me. But we're kind of putting off the message, I don't want to. And so this is one of the ways that we can unconsciously start to sabotage some of our results. Because again, that fear of rejection is always there. And so when we're talking to somebody, we can act kind of weird. We can act weird because we're so full of fear. Instead of being natural and just talking and connecting, we're up in our head. And so then we act a little weird and they pick up on that and I'm like, what's up with this person? And then instead of maybe giving us a second chance, they don't. And that makes it harder to build those connections. Like, remember when you were young and your parents would set up play dates for you? Did that ever happen to any of you? Like, it only happened like once or twice that I can remember in my own life. It was so awkward. It didn't feel natural. And when it doesn't feel natural, everything just stops working. And so then when we're full of the rejection energy, that brings that same kind of awkward, forced feeling. We're not natural. We don't show up as ourselves. And then that impacts other people's ability to connect with us. Now you might be thinking, oh, Kenneth, come on now. I'm pretty good at hiding what I feel. I struggle with low self-esteem like everyone else, but I can fake it. Well, maybe not as much as you think. And people might be seeing more into what's going on than you would expect. When people pretend that they're confident, it's like there's this part of them that's taken over, and it says like, okay, I'm going to manage the social interaction. I'm going to be your social interaction manager. And we're going to put on this mask and we're going to pretend like we're super confident. And so sometimes when people are doing that, they laugh too loud. They're boisterous. If you ever watch teenagers out in public, they're usually like super loud because they're trying to wear the mask and compensate and look tough sometimes. So because this manager is trying to avoid rejection, it has this like overthinking, analyzing way of doing things where it's like, don't screw up. And that often just, it puts us into our head. And so we're thinking about what could go wrong. And when somebody says something, we're analyzing it too deeply and we're thinking, how should I respond to this? If I respond like this, how will they react? And we're trying to like set up all the dominoes and figure out how saying this one thing will influence things down the line. The problem with that is when we're in our heads, we're not here. We're not in the social interaction because there's a kind of an energy and a flow between people as we talk. When we're in the flow, we just naturally respond. But if we're in our head, it's like we're cut off from that. We can be a million miles away when we're talking to somebody because we're trying to avoid the rejection.
Okay, so eventually you're going to get to the point where you're going to tell us how not to do that, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Mask very often backfires. You can fool some people some of the time. And I've seen relationships that aren't actual relationships. They're just two people's masks hanging out together because they both feel uncomfortable and they're afraid to show what's under that mask. I have a sister-in-law, now an ex-sister-in-law, and she's an ex-sister-in-law because she decided to hold on to a mask over being her true self. And that really was so much of the cause of their divorce. She would not want to let anyone see her vulnerabilities. She was so afraid of being rejected and judged that she always had this facade up. And being around her made us all very uneasy. And all the siblings talked about it. It's so hard to be around her. And then because we were picking up on her energy, she felt it. And then she felt like, nobody likes me. I try so hard. And that was kind of the problem. She's trying so hard and she wasn't just being herself. So when she's never sharing how she feels, we're not connected to her. And we're wondering, even if it's not conscious, we're wondering, what's she thinking about? Is she mad? Does she like me? Does she hate me? I don't know. And when there's that question mark, you can't connect with the person because you're always kind of on guard. Like, what are they going to do next? And when you do something that hurts their feelings and they pretend like there's no problem, you're like, oh, that's not normal. But then maybe they just put up the wall more and they have that fake smile on and you're just kind of weirded out. And you're like, I'd like to have a relationship with this person, but I don't know who this person is and they're not really letting me see. So we fear sharing what's under the mask. Not sharing what's under the mask can really ruin things pretty severely. And boy, this gets so much deeper than just connecting with people, because if we're constantly wearing a mask, we're basically hiding from ourselves too. We're afraid to face the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities that we have, and it disconnects us from ourselves. It cuts us off from our emotions. It cuts us off from important parts of us, important resources we have inside. And it can plunge us into this world of just living in total phony fakeness all the time.
And also keeps us from making connections with other people who would have the real things that we have too. Like you can't find the people, right, that have the same interests that you do if you don't ever let people know that that's an interest, right?
Yes. In fact, it has a lot to do with why I'm married, and I'll tell you about that later. So how do we shift this? How do we start shifting away from like wearing a mask to like having a better presence and showing up differently for people? If hiding behind the mask doesn't work, should we just like share all of our weaknesses up front? Like, hello, my name is David. My mother doesn't think I'm good enough and I can never earn that in her eyes, so I hate her. How about you? Where are you? I'm like, no, that's not going to work so well. Oversharing is a strategy I've tried in the past, but it doesn't produce the best results. we don't need to fake anything, but we also don't need to share all of our feelings with strangers. It's okay to remember that there's different levels of interaction with people. And when you meet someone for the first time, it's going to be just the shallow layers of your personal onion. That's okay. You slowly build on that. But if you jump in too deep too fast, it can scare people. Be like, what's wrong with this person? Why are they telling me all their deepest, darkest secrets? You probably had that. There's some emotional vampires out there that just will like, oh, someone that can help me, and they just dump everything. And you're like, oh man, you should talk to a therapist or something. I used to do that because it got me attention. I've changed, it's better this way. So if you want to change the present energy, you need to make some inner shifts first. So, like I said, the thing that sets up the rejection fear we have is that it's connected to the idea of our worth in the first place. Like, if these people reject me, that means I suck. That means I'm not cool. That means I'm inadequate. Nobody wants to be my friend. I'm not good enough. That's what's happening in our heads, even though it's not happening in English. That's what's going on in the subconscious, right? So this is where we need to start shifting over the way we see our worth and the reasons that we need humans. Most of us, okay, we all have the need for affiliation. We need to be in relationships with people where we can trust them and we feel trusted and loved and cared about. That's the affiliation need we have as humans. We usually try to make the relationships do a lot of heavy lifting. We usually try to get more out of those than what they really should offer. And that's trying to give ourselves a sense of worth. Relationships are never strong enough, and I don't care who you are or who you're around. That's something that only you can fill. And so first of all, we just need to break this idea in our head that our worth has anything to do with someone else's opinion. It doesn't. Your worth comes from who you are. Your worth comes from you existing. You're here, you exist, therefore you have value, you're alive. And that can be a hard shift to make, and it's going to constantly pop up where you feel crappy if someone rejects you. And every time that happens, you need to remind yourself, I know it feels this way because my old ancient brain thinks that my worth has to do with my social standing in the hierarchy of the tribe. But I'm okay just as I am. And I don't need to get my value from other people. I get it from who I am. And I increase my feelings of that worth. I increase my feelings of self-esteem by taking care of myself. I really love the book 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. One of his rules in there is treat yourself as if you were someone that you were responsible for taking care of. That is some of the most important advice I have ever heard. When you take care of yourself, when you put time and energy into you, you show your brain we matter. Whatever we do with whatever we point our energy at, that's where our value lies, right? Why is it that toddlers who can't even talk are always trying to grab the smartphones out of mommy and daddy's hands? Because mom and dad are always staring at this phone. The kid is looking at the adult, and the adult's looking at this thing, and whatever the parents are looking at, that must be an important thing. That must have value and worth. And so, phones are important. Phones are valuable. So as we turn our attention on ourselves and go, you know what? I deserve a massage. Or, you know what? I need to take some time to manage my emotions. I need to read a book tonight. I need to do some journaling. I need to do some affirmations. I need to work through some feelings. That shows our subconscious that we matter. And we start transitioning over from this system of other people determine my value to I have value in and of myself, and therefore I am worth taking care of. That really matters. That's the shift we make, and that's how we start. And the other thing we need to do in order to make that shift, and this is a hard one and you're not going to like it, we have to accept our weaknesses. And when I say accept our weaknesses, I'm not saying that we should go, hey, this is just who I am, and then use that as an excuse to never grow. I'm not saying that. But we have to accept that we are here right now where we're at. And we can't, listen to me very carefully, some of you really need to hear this, we can't do better than we've been doing. This is where we're at. We want to do better. We're like, no, I know how to do better. I know how, and I'm not doing it. Well, That's because knowing how to do something and actually being able to do it are very different things. And so we've got to accept, this is where I'm at, this is the best I can do right now. And maybe I can make those like 1% improvements this week. I can do this a little bit more, just in this little zone of our growth. This is our growth zone. It's very small. We think I should be able to do this because I read a book. No, not how human behavior works. I'm sorry. Whatever you have, whatever the vulnerability or whatever the weaknesses are, just accept them. Okay, well, this is the best I can do. Oh well. If I accept this now, I can get better. But very often we are like runners who timing ourselves around the track and we're going too slow. And so we sit down and start punching our legs because we're just not good enough. And if these dumb legs would only run faster, we would be better. And then we get up and we try to run with bruises all over, and we do even worse. Are you getting this message? This is a really important one. When you accept your weaknesses, when you accept that you have worth just the way you are right now in all your imperfections, congratulations. You're going to start caring less and less what other people think about you. Now, as far as like, what do you do when you're actually going to go talk to somebody, if you're about to go into a social interaction where you'd like to make friends, or just any social interaction, at the grocery store or at the library, go in with an intention to love and help whoever you're talking to. Because our intention when we're in social situations is often, don't get rejected, don't say anything dumb, don't feel bad about ourselves. When that's the intention, it often backfires. And sometimes we go in with a fairly selfish intention of, I'm just here to do what I want and get the knowledge that I need, and then I'm out. And that's not a good connection energy. But I can tell you, when you shift that intention to, I'm going to help this person in any way I can. Maybe I'm just going to give them a little quick compliment. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'll just smile, genuinely smile from the depths of my heart, and I will look into their eyes. And I'll try to connect to their inner divinity and send this message through my eyeballs like, hey, I see you and you matter. Maybe it's just that. But that puts you in a high level of energy. And when that's on the inside, it's going to show up on the outside. It's going to come through in the way you talk. It's going to come through in the tone. It's going to come through in the body language. People are going to feel it. They're going to feel different when you come in with that. And now you may be thinking, well, but I don't want to help some people or love them. They're jerks. True. It's true. But you have to ask yourself, why are these people jerks sometimes? And if I could tell you one of the greatest secrets of human nature, I hope you will listen to this and write it down and let this bounce around your head for the next 6 to 12 years. People are only jerks when they're hurt and scared. It's their own weaknesses, their own worries that make them act poorly towards others. It's so true, but hurt people hurt people. And if you remember that, and if you start to see through the appearances, see through the masks, to what's underneath, that is going to massively change your life. It's going to change the people around you too. Because when they get in your face with anger, you're going to be able to see through the anger and go, oh no, they're struggling, they're hurting. I wonder what they're struggling with. I wonder what I could say right now to help them and make them feel better. When you remember and see their weaknesses and doubts, it's going to be a lot easier to love them. And that is the key to developing some true love for human beings. Remember that they need connection just as badly as you do. Be genuinely interested in them. Another thing you can do as you're going out into the world, you can actually prepare to go out into the world. And I have to do this sometimes because I'm an introvert and I get my energy from being alone, and social interactions drain me. And so I have to gear up. I have to like amp up my energy and remember like, oh, I'm going out. I got to get in connection energy. Here we go. And so here's where the affirmations come in. You can say to yourself, I love connecting with people, even if you're an introvert. Even if you find social situations draining, you can remind yourself, I love connecting with people, because even introverts need connection with people. We just don't want it in loud, noisy places with thousands of people. We want quiet, smaller places, good, deep conversations. But we need the connection. You can say, I love connecting with people. I help everyone around me feel safe and visible. I am confident and charismatic. When you put yourself into that mode and you're going out there to connect with people and help, different results. People are going to want to be around you because they feel good when they're around you. And that's how you start drawing people to you like a magnet.
It seems like too that once you get to the point where you have that self-respect that you were talking about developing, like treating yourself like you're somebody that you're responsible of taking care of, and you start going, my worth is already great, whether or not no matter what I do, that I have worth without it, then you also start seeing other people in that way. Like, it doesn't matter if this person says something awkward or says something offensive or whatever, they have worth too. And it feels like once you start realizing that about yourself, you start treating people as though they have that worth as well, and they pick up on that readily, right? When you go, oh, everybody I meet today has worth, even if they feel like they're a jerk to me, or even if then you have to go, well, they're coming from somewhere that I'm not coming from, clearly. But in order to, they'll definitely pick up on that energy. That's energy that you bring that people gravitate to. If you go, oh, these people all have inherent amazing worth too, and treat them that way, it seems like that would elevate everybody, not just you. So if it starts to feel selfish, like, oh, that feels selfish or self-centered to treat myself that well, then you recognize too, that elevates everybody when you start recognizing that worth in yourself and in them.
Yes. Yes.
That was a connection that I just made as you were talking.
Oh, can I go super deep a little bit here? Are you guys ready for that? Can you handle a little bit of super deep tonight?
A little deep dive.
We do that? We're going too deep already? The lens you see yourself through is the lens that you see others through. And if you're struggling with other human beings, I would highly recommend you start looking at how you view yourself. Because when you make that shift and love you, things start to change. Kelly brings up a good point in the chat. Yes, except sociopaths. It's true. Thankfully, I run into those very often. Sociopaths, yeah, they've got some brains that have need some development. Some parts of them are turned off and they don't have a lot of capacity to feel, but it's just because they're extra baggage.
True sociopaths, though, are pretty rare. Most of the time, people that we see as sociopaths are really just people who are scared or hurt or awkward.
And everybody likes to throw around the term narcissist these days. A lot of times if I work with people in relationships, they're like, I think my spouse is a narcissist. I'm like, no, they're not. I know that you read that article online and you see some similarities, but the narcissists, which it's a real personality disorder for sure. And I know one, he's a scary dude. He has such low levels of self-love that all the bombast and the charisma gets to cover up chronic inadequacy, chronic weakness. These people have the most damage, the most psychological baggage of anybody else. And it's so deep that not even a sliver of them can admit it consciously. So yeah, I mean, those people, the stats on them changing are not very hopeful, but most of the people, even when they're acting similar to a narcissist, it's just their pain showing up. So once you get this connection, this presence, that when you get your inner world changed, then it's time to start working on rapport with people. And rapport is basically just a responsiveness to another person. You're talking to them, there's that flow going back and forth. It's a sense of psychological connection. And what creates rapport is a feeling of commonality with the other person. Sometimes I'll make an obscure reference to a TV series I like, just drop it casually in conversation, and the person picks it up and they're like, hey, and I'm like, ah, and now we feel like, okay, cool, we've got this in common. This is great, I love this. So that's a lot of what we're doing when we talk to people, is we're looking to build as much commonality as we can, as fast as we can. People who are like us will like us. We like people who are like us. That's basically the secret of rapport. And there's usually something you can find in common with anybody. Now, when you're actually in the social engagement and you're talking to them, we naturally fall into patterns where we start to mirror what they're like. If they talk fast and excitable, we start to talk fast and excitable. And if they're a little slower, we kind of match them. This all happens subconsciously anyway. But we can do it deliberately too. If the person is talking really fast, we can like speed up a little bit to match them. That's going to make them feel like, oh, this person's like me. They get me. You know, as a therapist, I work with a lot of different people from all different walks of life, and I have something in common with all of them. And if they come in and they're like super far to the left politically, well, that's my right, left politically, I bond with them on the commonalities that I have on the left. And if they're super right wing, I bond with those things that I feel there too. And I think people walk out of sessions with me thinking like, oh, he's on the left like me, or he's on the right like me. I may wonder at this point, wait a minute, that sounds like really inauthentic. So like if somebody crosses their legs, we're supposed to cross our legs too? Not necessarily inauthentic. It's just doing something we naturally do when we feel comfortable with someone. We're choosing to just get out ahead of it just a little bit. Because, well, consider this. Have you ever been polite when you felt grumpy? I think we've all had to do that. Is that fake? Not necessarily. Not everyone needs to see your grumpiness. Grumpiness is not an emotion that you should necessarily share with people that you don't know. So we're just choosing to let out certain parts of us that tends to fit the situation. Not because we're trying to manipulate, because we're trying to connect. And so there are genuine things I'm right wing about. There are genuine things I'm left wing about. And it's not fake for me to connect with someone on that. So we're not just one thing. And we don't have to share everything we think and feel. But we're just adapting to the situation. We're just trying to match how they feel and make them feel comfortable because we care about them and we want to connect with them. And it's really important to show up with that authenticity. Wendy?
Sorry, I always have something to say. I've noticed too that the best way for me to do that, especially when I'm meeting new people, is just to ask questions. Just ask all the questions. So first people start to feel like, oh, this person really cares about me. But also as you're asking questions, do you like to read? What books do you like to read? Was the last Netflix series you binged and loved? What was, like, what's your favorite movie? Or, what was your favorite vacation? Or once you start asking those questions, you're eventually going to get to one that is the same as you, right?
That's true.
And so it's kind of like serves two purposes: in one, helping them feel like you're genuinely interested in them, which you are, and two, to help you find common ground. So
Right.
I feel like that's one of the easiest and best ways to start connecting with people, is just start asking questions about things that they like, or things that they've done, or places they've been, or places they've lived, or, and you can, if that's awkward for you, I have a family, a couple of Asperger kids in my family, and so sometimes that social interaction is awkward and doesn't come naturally. You can have a pre-planned list of questions to ask people in your head, as long as you don't, when they answer something that is like one of your answers, as long as you don't railroad the conversation at that point. But yeah, finding that common ground is not hard if you just start asking questions, and people love to talk about themselves.
True.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
And that's stuff that you can plan ahead of time too. Like sometimes the mirroring, you get a little too in your head about, if you're like, oh, they're doing this, I better do this, or whatever, if it doesn't come naturally. But questions, you can have those pre-planned and, write them on an index card or something,
Right.
if you have to in the beginning. But people appreciate being asked questions about themselves and like reflecting on themselves and things they've done. It's a good way to start anyway.
For sure. Yeah, it lets them have a chance to bring out their authentic self. And to bring your authentic self to an interaction is so important. And it is the reason I'm married, because my wife is really good at blending in and being a social chameleon. And she told me every guy she ever dated, she was trying to match herself to them. And she dated a lot of guys that she didn't like because she wasn't being her. And she told me, I decided that when I was going out with you, I was just going to be myself. I was done. I was so tired of pretending. I'm just going to be me. And if he doesn't like it, then fine. He can, he's not the one. He's not the one. So he did that for the first time on our first date. And we were walking around Salt Lake, and we just like sat down on some step to talk. And this guy walked by, a homeless guy, and he had this huge white beard that was like down to his belly, and he wasn't wearing shoes. So he's just walking around barefoot. And she paused the conversation, and her eyes got real big, and she looked at me and she goes, "Enough." In that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I found the one.
You're like, I'm in love immediately.
Immediately. And if she was in her head, she might be like, oh, he's going to think I'm weird if I do that. But that was the thing that made me first go, oh, maybe I am interested in this girl. Before it had just been like chit chat over dinner, right? So when we're building our presence up, let's just go back real quick and summarize presence. We need to change what's on the inside so that we can show up on the outside differently. And that means accepting our weakness and accepting that our worth comes from the inside, and that our inadequacies and shortcomings don't do anything to detract from our value. Next, we go into conversations with the intention to make them feel valued. And we work on building rapport with somebody by finding commonality. Questions are a wonderful way to do that. If it's not going to freak you out too much, you can experiment with a little bit of mirroring. If they scratch their eyebrow, you don't just immediately like copy everything they do, or they're like, this is weird. They feel it and they're like, what? So maybe lag, like wait 10 seconds, and maybe you cross your legs after they cross their legs. The whole point is just to vibe with them. You're not being inauthentic. You're just getting in the same groove there, right? You want to match up with those things. And finally, be authentic and don't feel like you have to fit into some mold. Now, being authentic, remember, means being authentic at the appropriate level of self-disclosure. We don't jump into all the deep, dark secrets on the first interaction, right? Now, if you do all of these things, are you going to walk away from one conversation as best friend? No. We need to bring our presence to interactions. We also need to invest the proper amount of time. It kind of sucks how long it takes to create a really good friend. Scientists have researched this, and to become a casual friend with somebody takes 50 hours of hanging out. And if you want to get a BFF out of it, it's going to take you 200 hours. And I think this is part of why it gets harder as an adult, because when you're in school and you can just hang out afterwards, fine, play video games together, that works. But as an adult, you really have to plan it. And it's okay to know that you're playing the long game here. Have any of you ever grown an avocado? You tried that before?
Not in Utah.
I had some avocados in 2017, and it's like I cut them open, I ate them, and I was looking at the seeds. I couldn't throw them away. It was like the seed was like, "No, we want to live, please." I was like, "Okay, I'll go play." And so I got my little paper cup. I put the toothpicks in to suspend it in the water. You always have to like keep the bottom half in the water and the top half dry. I put them in the windowsill and I kept the water full, and I stared at those things every day for weeks, and they didn't do anything. And I thought, I must have got some bum avocado seeds here. But it was weeks and weeks, and finally saw some little bit of growth coming out of them, and the roots started to come out and they started to grow. And now, despite killing them down halfway because I left them in the car for too long and they got too hot, they're still like 2.5 feet tall now. Just like the avocado, we got to remember, we're playing the long game as we try to build best friends, right? It's not just time we have to spend with the people, but it's important what happens during that time. going to come down to like, are we caring about them? Are we showing them that we want to build a friendship? And that means doing your fair share of initiating the conversations, initiating the hangout. It obviously should be like fairly even. And if you're doing 90% of the work and not getting anything back, maybe they're just not good friendship material. Although I've got a friend, and I met him in my mid-20s, and so we didn't have a lot of time to hang out together and build much of a friendship. And he's just kind of been like acquaintance level, but he's just kept up pestering me. And wouldn't you know it, we're getting deeper into friendships, Bill. And he's just been doing all the work. And so now I'm starting to return it too. But it takes a bit. So one thing you want to look at too is like, do you return people's texts? Because that can be a real bill killer when they text you and you just don't say anything back, or you wait a couple weeks. That can really be hard. That shows a message of I'm not that interested. So the energy you bring to that, showing that you want to develop the relationship, really matters. And that kind of brings us to what
I was just going to read what Damaris said in the chat. This was a little while back, but it still applies to what you're saying now. She said, there are no boring people. Every interaction should be anthropological research opportunity. If your environment negates friendship, find your tribe. And so I was just thinking what she's saying about sometimes people are just not your tribe. And that doesn't mean you can't be acquaintances or see them socially or whatever, but the people who make you feel like you can still be 100% authentic and be yourself and they will still be cool with that, those are your people. Right. And trying to fit in with people who don't make you feel like that is not worth your time. And if there are no people like that in your life right now, you just have to branch out. You have to keep trying because your tribe is out there. You know, you just haven't figured out how to find them yet. But just a super quick anecdote. One of my children was doing something super quirky. I mean, weirdo, not too long ago. And I was like, what are you doing? No, people are gonna like run away from you for doing that. I was like, normal people are not gonna think that's cool. And he was like, Mom, normal people don't need friends. All of the weirdos now know that if they don't have friends, I'll be their friend. Which I was like, I don't know how to argue with that, but on some level, I was like, that's totally true. That, you know, if you need to be yourself, if you feel that need to express your weirdo-ness, then, you know, sometimes it's worth holding that stuff back for a little bit, at least, until you find some other common ground. But sometimes that's how you find your people, is just by going, look, this is just what I am. And eventually I'm going to find somebody who gets it.
Right. You know, on that topic of like finding the right people, you can kind of do some filtering, just like letting your freak flag fly, you know, be weird. I've always just been weird in any situation, much to the embarrassment of my wife. But I'm just going to be me. And when I do, the people who are like me are drawn to me because like attracts like. It's not the opposites we're looking here for. We're looking for it's the like people. And sometimes you're just trying to vibe with the wrong person. I think one of the most useful rules I've ever heard is the rule of thirds. It basically says no matter what you do, 1/3 of people won't like you at all. No matter what you do, the other third will just feel indifferent towards you. And the last third, that's your tribe. Those are your people. And no matter what you do, you cannot convince the 2/3 to like you. If you do, if you're like putting on the mask and trying to impress them, they feel that it's inauthentic. They hate you more. Your tribe, because you're camouflaged, you're acting like not yourself. They don't recognize you. They don't see you. And so you cut yourself off from the real people that are yours. And so knowing that like 2/3 of people might not care or like you, it's really freeing because now you can go out and talk to people, and if they don't like that thing, then
they're just in that 2/3 and you move on.
Right. It's like, it reminds me of, I think I've done almost this exact thing as Dwight Schrute on The Office, where he was at a party and he said something like, you watch Battlestar Galactica? And they said no. And he goes, well, then you're an idiot. And he's just being himself, and he's going to find the people that like Star Galactica. And that can be a great way to filter people out. I've often walked up to people and been like, hey, have you watched Firefly? And I didn't like it. I'm like, okay, nice to meet you.
Later.
They're not my people. I know it. But we have to be thinking like, I don't have to be friends with everyone. And I don't want to like put all this effort into making a friendship with someone who's not really too similar to me. So we need to filter them out and find, do they have the same values we have? And what kind of friendship am I looking at having with this person? There can be different levels of friendship. I have some like video game friends. We just play video games together, and that's it. I have other friends we talk about deep stuff together. And not every friendship has to look the same. So know that, and you don't have to be friends with everybody. So how do we find people? It's a little bit harder as we get out of school, as we enter adult years, but you can get in the habit of just talking to everyone around you, striking up a conversation when you're standing in lines or in waiting rooms. When you just show up with that energy, people are going to like you, want to be around you anyway, but you can actually have some surprisingly good conversations and meet some really cool people. I like to remind myself that there really are no boring people. It's like, I can't remember who said it in the chat box, but everyone has something interesting about them. Everyone has something they can teach you, and exploring who they are. It's kind of like you're out frolicking in the meadow and you're like, what does this flower smell like? Oh, delightful. I wouldn't take it home, but it's nice. That's cool. And it's fun. It builds connections. It builds a sense of community. It feels like, oh, these are my people. All these people around American Fork and Utah County are my people. You know, the way I found my best friend is we were just sitting in class and we happened to sit next to each other, and he just leaned over and cracked a joke and I joked back, and like instant rapport. I'm always ready to joke and mess around. And like within, oh God, I think it was like the next day, we're like, hey, teacher, can we go pick up some donuts for the whole class? We just want to go hang out together. And the teacher was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And friendship begun. And now he is my super friend. He's beyond a best friend. He's a super friend. We do share a lot of the same interests, right? So that's another thing. As far as interests, go do stuff. Do stuff you're interested in and do it repeatedly. Keep at it. The Sarah in Orem has painting classes that I've been to. Heck, the American Fork Library has painting classes, actually. Wendy has hosted these
really great ones.
I went, I liked it. I bought a painting supply kit, and you know what? Maybe I wouldn't learn too much more from going to that same beginner's class with the Sarah or wherever, but if I keep going back, I'm going to be around people who like to paint. There's something we have in common. And then we start up a conversation, and you go repeatedly enough. You have to it feels like you kind of have to see people often enough to feel comfortable to strike up a conversation. You don't have to, but it makes it easier. If you're going to the same place repeatedly, you just kind of become a fixture there. It's a little bit easier to strike up conversations like, hey, I've seen you here before. And there's a great opening line. Hey, haven't I seen you here before? It's just a line to start a conversation. It doesn't have to be like perfectly thought out, right? Be looking for things you're interested in. Be doing things that you're interested in. Do them repeatedly, and you can be looking for groups online. Sometimes they do have meetups. Pandemic or no, I know. Another thing that you can do is ask people you know to introduce you to their friends. And I was reading about somebody who went to a party, and she was actually working with a friendship coach, trying to like more relationships in her adult years. And she said, hey, could I reached out to a friend and said, can I contact this person who came to your party that I met? And maybe you could grease the wheels for us and put us together. And they just sent an email and said, hey, I met you at so-and-so's party. You seemed really interesting. Want to get to know you better. If you'd be down for lunch sometime, that'd be great. If not, no pressure. It can be fun. And it worked. And they went and they got lunch and started to build more of a relationship. So really, it's just going to places and doing things. And eventually you're going to find people that you have commonalities with. So when we're trying to connect with people, another big part of it, part of your presence is just your own personal awareness. Why am I here? What am I feeling? What are these people doing? What kind of vibes am I getting off of them? And it's kind of fun to think like, is that my new best friend that I don't even know yet? What kind of adventures will we have? Because I kind of had my friendships set. Like I had my people, I have my friends, I don't need any more friends. And this was back when I was like 26, and someone dropped out of a play, and somebody I knew said, "Hey, we need somebody to come play Center to Fifth, and you're in town. Will you fill in?" And I'm like, "All right, sure, fine, whatever." So I went and I did that play, and Officers Lock, Stock, and Barrel have become two really dear friends of mine. And it was kind of weird to develop such good relationships when it hadn't happened for years, because it was like refreshing. I was like, holy crap, if I had said no to this play, and I was thinking about saying no, I never would have met Nick and John. And I love Nick and John. We have such good times together. There's these new friends, and I didn't even know they existed. I wonder if all these other people around me are potential best friends that I just haven't met yet. It's really kind of exciting when you see it that way. And it kind of gets you out to try more things and rub shoulders with more people. And it's fun. Even as an introvert, you find it's fun to get to know different people, to get to have the different interactions, and then go home and recharge, and then go out and have them again. Another thing that's going to help us when we're in the moment is connecting with confidence. And like I said, a lot of that's going to come from just knowing where your worth comes from, accepting your weaknesses. And part of accepting your weaknesses is knowing that it's okay to screw up. And there's so many times I put my foot in my mouth all the time in social settings. And when I do, I just go, well, that was awkward. Something like that. Just call it out, make it a joke, laugh at it. And then people laugh and like, oh, okay, cool. He can laugh at himself. It's easier for people to connect with you when you do that. Call out the weaknesses. And if you're super nervous, you can actually say that. It's a confident thing to tell people how nervous you are. Like, whew, I've been around this many people in a long time. I've been in like shutdown mode for pandemic. Like, this is really nerve-wracking to be around so many humans. And like, oh my gosh, me too. It's likely what they're going to tell you. And so there you go. You've got your commonality to start building on. We've gone over a lot of concepts. We've talked about rapport, talked about kind of filtering people. I want to give you a couple other quick little tips you can use to build rapport with somebody. Use their name. People love to hear their name. And when you do it authentically, they just kind of like, they perk up. They're like, oh, that's nice. I like that. You don't want to overdo it, and you want to make sure that your heart's in the right place, because I know a guy and he's a salesman. And so he knows this is like a sales tactic. And when he says my name, I kind of go, how dare you use my name so casually? Like, this is me. This is I'm special. This is who I am. So don't overdo it. Another thing is to remember things that they say. And it's okay to cheat and write those things down so that you can remember them when the relationship's new. So that the next time you see him, like, hey, you mentioned you like to boat. You been boating lately? And like, oh my gosh, well, in fact, I have. Like Wendy said, people love to talk about themselves. They also like to talk to people who are doing interesting things. And you may not think you're a very interesting person, but you have interests. And having interests makes you interesting. So as you get into your stuff and you share that with people, they're going to think that's cool. You can also expand yourself by trying new things and growing. But when you're just like super interested in stuff and you talk to people about it, people are like, oh, that's interesting. And maybe your thing is like knowing naval battles of French history, and that's the only thing you care about. Cool. If you're interested in that, some people are going to be really interested in that too. And that's going to help you to find your people. But usually, rather than just being like interested in our stuff and talking about stuff that they're interested in, we're interested in, we're more in like desperation mode, and that kills rapport. We're like, oh, I need a friend. I need to make this person a friend. I got to do everything right. That's another thing to look out for. So when you're actually in the social situation, trying to build a rapport, trying to talk to them, trying to create that flow, here's how you can do it. Questions are really important, but they're not all of the equation. Because when you're trying to build a relationship with someone, it's not just one-sided. Because if you only ask questions and share nothing about yourself, they're just going to feel like they were interviewed. And they're not going to know anything about you. And in order to start liking you, they need to know something about you. They need to find the common things about you. They need to know a little bit about you to start trusting you too. And so for me, I like being a little weirder than the normies out there. And so I'll often just jump in with something really deep, see if I can find some good commonalities and cut through the small talk because it bores me. And sometimes people don't like it. Sometimes they say, tell me your life story in 30 seconds. And they're, well, what? Tell me your life story in 30 seconds. And they don't like that. And that breaks rapport. So just, if you try that, it may not work and it may not be helpful. We want to try to make people feel comfortable, but sometimes we're just having fun. But as far as the talking about deeper things, just remember, you don't just go out and try to somebody on the first date. Well, actually, nowadays I think that's pretty common, but we probably take things a little bit slower when we're trying to build these friendships. So when you're going over the normal questions with people and they're asking you the normal questions, here's a great tip I got from Charisma on Command. And honestly, if you struggle with making friends at all, if you feel like you're going to maybe a little socially awkward, Charisma on Command is one of the best YouTube channels out there. Really, really great resources.
Charisma on
Command.
Command, not demand, command. Charisma
Command.
on
Yep.
command.
So they're going to ask a normal question like, hey, where are you from? And they kind of talk about how if you say, oh, I'm from American Fork, they go, oh, or cool, me too. And it's kind of a dead end. And so when they ask you a question, you want to give them some stuff to respond to. You can like drop some threads in there for them instead of the short answers. The questions are an excuse to share more about yourself. If they ask you a factual question, where are you from? You can tell them, you can answer yes, no, but we're trying to connect and build. So you might say, yeah, you know what? I'm from American Fork. I would love to live in Ireland instead. I went on vacation there last year and it was amazing. And then they can go, oh, what was amazing about Ireland? Or why Ireland? Why not somewhere else? And so you're giving them, you're like throwing out these breadcrumbs, giving them some bait, and they can ask you the questions. Then you can dig deeper into their stuff too. If they give a very simple answer, like I'm from American Fork, you go, well, how long have you lived here? What's your favorite part about living in American Fork? Would you ever think about moving? Would you like to move somewhere else? And this, again, is a way you can find some commonalities. Maybe they say, you know what? I've always wanted to live in a small town and be a farmer. And you go, oh my gosh, me too. Let's talk about horticulture. So that's an important one. Ask the questions, but also have enough back in the responses to keep the conversation going. And that can pretty much keep you going in that. So make sure you're giving appropriate levels of disclosure. You're leaving things in there about your interests. You're trying to show them what you care about, what your values are. Like, yeah, I love Ireland because there's lots of sheep there, and instead of, I don't know, we're not making clothes out of polyester as much. Everything's made out of wool there, and that's natural, and I care about the environment. I don't know, something to that effect, sharing your values in the way that you respond. It's like a game of tennis. When they ask you something, you want to make sure you hit the ball back over the net. And if they kind of fumble, then you can help them send it back over. So when you're in the moment, you need to remember, like, I'm either going to ask them another question, expand on what they said, or I'm going to expand on something I care about. Hey, what do you like to read? Oh, you like military history? What do you like about military history? How about fantasy? You into fantasy? Oh my gosh. Hey, have you heard of Brandon Sanderson and the Stormlight Archive? And I work that Trojan horse into every conversation because I'm trying to get everyone to read Stormlight Archive. I saw that meme the other day. They had the Trojan horse with.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say, I need to send that to you if you haven't seen it.
Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about is a little bit more detail on how much to share and when. Honestly, you kind of got to go by a gut feeling here, but I want to introduce to you the pyramid of communication. And Wendy, can I share my screen?
Of course.
Okay, in that case, it'd be so much better if I can pull up a picture for you rather than try to explain this. This is a really super helpful concept.
Should be able to now.
Well, I've got a lot of pictures in this folder, and finding this one needle in the haystack is really something. Wow, and I have so many pyramids. Looking in my edumacation folder, apparently I enjoy things that are presented in a pyramid type of manner. Here we go. Okay, here it is. Kind of teeny. Let me zoom in as much as I can. The most shallow level of communicating with someone is through cliches, through water conversation talk. How's the weather? You know, Facts, did you see the game last night? Yep, we're sportsing pretty hard. Cool. Next, it's normal to start sharing opinions like, I liked the red teams that was sportsing more than the blue team that was sportsing. Hopes and dreams is where things start to get a lot deeper. And this is usually a place where we kind of have a gate set up, and we're trying to test whether people are safe to come through and see our hopes and dreams. Because if we share an opinion and they say that's stupid, then we go, uh-oh, lock the gate. I'm not letting them in any deeper. And this is where relationships often get stalled out. We might be doing something that makes the other person feel unsafe, and it could be as small as rejecting an opinion or showing that we don't care. Okay to disagree as long as we do it respectfully. But then we get into feelings. Deeper than that is fears, failures, and weaknesses, and at the very bottom is needs. And so as you progress with somebody, you're going to spend most of your time in the opinions area, finding the commonalities on things. And then you can maybe throw out a little bit of a sample. Share a dream, share something you care about deeply. See how they respond to it. And if they show you that they're not the type of person who's going to respect that, then okay, this is as far as this relationship is going to go. No further than this, unless they take accountability for that, take some responsibility, and then that's how you build to a deeper level. And so if you feel like you've offended somebody, you can call it out and be like, hey, you know what? I realized the other day when we were talking, I kind of rolled my eyes when you said this thing, and I realized that conveys a lot of disrespect, and it probably made you feel like I thought you were stupid for it. And I totally understand why you would feel that way. And I'm sorry, and I want to try to do better. I just had some strong opinions pop up. So as you build down the pyramid, and this is how you increase your emotional intimacy with any person. Okay, so now that I'm unshared, correct? Can we corroborate that I'm unshared?
Yep, we're back to normal speaker view.
So remember that it's going to take time. You're going to progress through the pyramid slowly, and like I said, it's going to be 200 hours if you want to create a best friend. And casual friends usually aren't talking about their deep, dark emotions. So don't try to rush it too much. We've all met the people who go on a first date and they're like, we're in love, we're getting married. Or in my case, 3 dates and then they're engaged. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Don't do that. And finally, we need to try to respect people's boundaries. If you're digging for something and they're not willing to open up, they don't trust you yet to unlock the gate, that's okay. Just keep being consistent and don't push. Let them be ready. Because there are some people that are never going to be wanting to share everything with you. They're afraid to share that with everyone else around them and even themselves. And so you can't take your relationship deeper than they have with themselves already. But if you hold on to the presence tool, even if you just work on showing up, changing your presence inside, coming in with the confidence, knowing like, yeah, I'm me, I've got flaws, this is great. Everyone should probably just go watch the Greatest Showman. Yeah, go watch The Greatest Showman, listen to the song again, get yourself pumped up, realize it's okay to be you. If you just do that, you're going to stand out. And people are going to feel comfortable around you. Some will be threatened by it. They're not your tribe. You're just looking for your 1/3. Just by working on your presence, just by increasing your own feelings of self-worth, it's going to make it so much easier to connect with people when those opportunities come up. I'm really excited to hear what happens as you start to apply this. So if you have an experience in the near future here with this, I would love to hear about it. I will put my email address into the chat box, but I'd like to know how this goes, whether it's challenges or successes. So are there any questions? If you have a question, you can feel free to unmute yourself.
I have a question if nobody else does.
Yes.
So probably a couple of questions, but I guess the one that popped up earlier that I was thinking of was, what if you have tried these things and had just hardcore rejection burn, what are some steps you can take to try and get that confidence back to try again? I think that's probably what a lot of people who struggle with this have experienced, and then they go, yeah, no, tried that once, did not work out. I've just resigned to being lonely.
I think in those cases, the thing that's causing the burn is still having that belief that the other people's rejection means something about us personally. And so we often have to spend time with ourselves going, okay, I know that I feel this way. I'm thinking this, I feel it. I know like intellectually it's not true, but I still believe it in my heart. And that can take some time to just sit with it and go, you know what? This is here for a reason. It's trying to protect me. I appreciate that this part of me is telling me this. But you then have to double down on the truth. And this is where affirmations can be so very helpful. Because if you wake up every morning and you're telling yourself, I love me just the way I am, I'm awesome, and my worth doesn't come from other people's opinion, say that to yourself all day long, and it's going to start to sink in. Just like growing the avocado. You've got to keep it in the water until it finally starts to grow.
Yeah, good answer.
Baha says, your chart was extremely helpful. I find that most of the conversations get stuck on the opinions level. Yes. So when that happens, you want to try to advance the conversation, you kind of have to go first. When you come up against someone else's wall, that's when you try to go a little bit deeper and you just offer them a little bit of a sample, see how they take it. And I've been around people where I've been consciously sharing more about myself, sharing my feelings, sharing deeper opinions and hopes and dreams, and they don't say anything back, and they're just like, oh, and I know, okay, cool.
Not my
Where
third.
they're comfortable, that's where I'm going to keep it. How to deal with emotional vampires. That can be tough. Setting a boundary there can be really hard. There's one easy way though that can turn people away. Emotional vampires are there to suck the life out of you. They don't actually want to change their life. They're just looking for support. And so you can hold up the garlic of responsibility to them and scare them off pretty quickly by simply asking them what they're going to do about it. That sounds really hard, you empathize with them. That's rough. What do you think you should do next? I don't know. But yeah, well, what do you think? What would be the most effective? And you just keep pinning them to the wall with the questions. And maybe you throw out a suggestion. You get really into like life coach mode, like, okay, you know what you need to do? This, and this. I want you to call me tonight when you've done those, and then we'll talk about it. And they'll be like, oh crap, people are going to hold me accountable. I can't just put my emotions on them anymore. And sometimes you just have to say, you know what? I would love to help you, but if you're just feeling like you need to dump on me and vent, I'm sorry, we can't have that kind of relationship. I am not an emotional garbage can, and I don't have room for this. Sorry. Help?
That's good.
Any other questions? Thank you. Here is my email. Love to hear about your experiences, and I spelled my name right, so good. All right. If there's nothing else,
Anybody else?
we will call it.
Okay. Thanks for coming tonight, everybody. Thank you so much, Kenneth. This was really informative and helpful, and I love how you gave us so much background and then went practical. Like, here's where you start. Here's exactly how to go for it. Love that. That's super helpful. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming, everybody. Check out Eventbrite for the library's other things that we have going on, and we do this AF Aware class on different topics every month, and there's also a relationship class every month going on right now. So check out Eventbrite for all of that stuff, and otherwise, thanks for coming. You guys have a good night.